Cool. So today we're demoing Express. What is Express again?
It's a framework to make Flask easier. Yeah, Flask mean.
Flask via mean. Okay, yeah, so it's somewhat of a micro framework. It's fairly unopinionated. So we can kind of structure our application in a lot of different ways. Express doesn't care so much. All right? Just gives us the basic tools to actually build a server. So that's kind of nice. So I've got this folder set up where we're going to do our project. It's just an Express demo folder. And I want to create this new project. So what was the step that we went through yesterday? Does anyone remember? To kick off a... Yeah, so we're going to do npm init. Oh, you know what? Let me change that. So I'm going to add a flag to this. If I add a flag of -y, it should allow me to just accept all the defaults without going through all the questions. So that kind of smooths things out a little bit. Okay, and you can see it just took all the defaults and created this package.json file for us. All right. So yesterday we talked about how we could manage our dependencies here inside package.json. But before we didn't actually have any dependencies. Now we're actually going to have one because we want to install Express. Right? So how are we going to install Express? npm install. It's just going to be Express. Yeah. And actually, if I want to shorten that up a bit, I can just say npm I instead of install. Okay. So npm I Express. Okay, so while it's doing that, let's keep an eye on our package.json, and you'll see that now we have this dependencies object in here, which is laying out what dependencies we have for this project.
So now we have Express after we install it like that?
Correct. So where is it? Does anyone know?
Inside.
It's inside this node modules folder. Correct. Let's pop that open. Wow, I thought we only installed Express. What the heck happened here? Express has its own dependencies. Right, so if we go to, let's go to npmjs.org and then just search for Express. We looked at it yesterday, but you can see here that it has 30 dependencies. Right? Okay. Now how about those dependencies? Might they also have dependencies?
Dependencies all the way down.
Yeah, exactly. So whenever we install something, not only is it installing that particular thing, it's also installing the dependencies of it and then all the sub-dependencies. So you can see how the node modules folder could tend to become a bit of a black hole. It could become quite large. All right. And so later on, when we actually do for deployment and we create a repository, we're going to make sure that we ignore the node modules folder because we don't want that to be part of our repo since it's probably going to be quite large. All right, cool. So that's where Express is. It is inside our node modules. What is a node module? Who can tell me what a node module is? Someone say folder.
A node module is a folder.
It's library.
It's a package, right? Yeah, exactly.
That's
So
P and npm.
correct. Node package manager. Yeah, exactly. So when we're installing a new node module, we are installing a package. Nice. Okay, cool. So now we want to see how to actually use this thing. And yesterday, actually before we get there, we'll take a quick peek at the package-lock.json. So what this is doing is this is locking our packages to a specific version. Okay, and you'll see inside the package lock file, we're seeing more about all these subdependencies as well. So it's not just talking about Express, right? Okay. So if we want to make sure that that a particular developer who's working on the project has the same versions that we do, you're going to want to make sure that this package-lock.json file gets connected to the repo itself. Okay. All right. So we don't want to ignore that. Cool. Let's close that out. So yesterday we created this app.js, and we're basically going to be doing the same thing today. Here in the platform, you can see there's some basic code for a demo here. I know that's kind of small. But we're just going to create this server.js file that's going to be able to serve up a single route, and then we'll kind of talk about it. So we'll walk through this code here. All right, I'll create my server.js, drop in the code, and let's go through this here. Okay. Tom, what is happening on line 1? Actually, it's now line 2.
If you define the variable express as a constant,
Mm-hmm.
and if you define the express module, the one you install,
Okay. So we'll set it equal to the result of requiring the Express module. Right? Okay, cool. How about line 5, Miguel? Mm-hmm. Okay, and setting, oops, it equal to the result of requiring, oops, what am I saying? Invoking Express. Okay, so Express is what then? Should be a function, right? Okay, and we'll log that out to actually verify that. So I'll just drop in a log up here, console.log express. All right, now we got that. Yes, it should. Much better. All right. Line 9, Michael. What's happening there?
We're using that variable app, which is invoking express, to get whatever is in, well, it uses that URL with the /.
Okay.
And that's the promise, I guess, that it's going to hold on to.
Not a promise. So we're invoking this function get, and then we're passing it 2 arguments. The first argument is going to be the actual route. Okay, so it's /. That means that we're just hitting the index route, right? The second argument is a callback function. Okay. The callback function takes a couple arguments, the request and the response argument. So this should look kind of familiar. We saw something like that when we created a server using the HTTP module, right? Okay. And the reason why that should look familiar is because actually Express is using the HTTP module under the hood.
So is response HTTP response?
Well, what it's going to do is it's going to add some different things to the request object for us. Okay, so it makes working with the server a little bit more smooth. But under the hood, it's still using the HTTP module, right?
Quick question. I mean, this might be a little bit too far forward, but like app.get isn't like the jQuery get. Is that like we could do like app.post or something, or is
Yeah, we'll be able to have different methods that we can respond to.
Okay.
Exactly. You're correct. Cool. So we are invoking the get function of the app and passing it a route and a callback function. Okay, now we hop down here to line 13. Anthony, what's happening there? This should look pretty familiar, actually, from yesterday.
We're
Server.
setting it to listen to a port.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a callback that's going to run that function when it receives.
Right. Set the app to listen on port 8000 and pass in a callback to run once the app is listening. Okay? So this callback function is not going to run every time somebody makes a request to our application. It's just going to run that very first time once we start listening. Right? Or if we're using NodeMon, it's going to run every time we restart the server. So if we make a change to some file and save it, then it'll run again. Okay, cool. So let's say that somebody has hit our index route. Okay? What happens then when a person hits our index route?
It's going to say about express.
So technically, though, what we're going to do is we're actually going to invoke that callback function, right? Okay, cool. Long, what happens when we invoke this callback function for the index route?
It's gonna respond with the string without express.
Yeah, we're just going to send back this string. Okay, cool. Does everyone feel pretty good about the code that we have here? Pretty straightforward. We just have this one route, and we're just going to respond with a string. All right, cool. Let's actually run this guy. Come back down to the terminal here, and we'll say nodemon server.js. Okay. Notice how we're listening on 8000, so that was our callback there. Let's go here and visit our app, Hello Express. There we go. We're in good shape. No, I said we're in good shape. I wasn't. Watch your mouth, young man. That's what you guys heard? Sorry about that. No, I was trying to say we're in good shape. All right. So that's all fine and good. But is this how we're going to want to respond to requests with strings like this? Yeah, we probably want to use some kind of a templating engine, right? Because using strings like this could get very messy over time. We could have situations where we have a very large page and we have to intertwine some static content with some dynamic content. What a pain in the butt, right? All right. So we have something that we can use for that. There are actually a number of different templating engines that you can use in Node, but the one that we're going to show you guys is called EJS. Okay. So let's look that up real quick. EJS, whoops. Node. So here's the page on NPM. You can see that this one's pretty popular too. Over 4 million weekly downloads. 0 dependencies, that's kind of nice. I'm trying to find the main page for this. Not EJS Node. Because I wanted to show you guys the docs on that as well. Okay, so it's ejs.co. Okay, docs right here. So this is basically how we're going to use EJS, is that if we want to create some kind of control structure, we're going to use these brackets and the % sign. Okay, so that should look fairly familiar. What were we using in Flask and Django again?
That's okay.
Yeah, well, Django, the version of Django we were using does not use Jinja, but the newer versions of Django do use Jinja. But anyway, back in Python, we were using a curly brace followed by a percent sign, right? This is just a bracket, okay? And then this looks the same as well because when we want to output something to the template, we're using the bracket followed by the percent sign. So that's pretty cool. Not too much difference here. So let's get inside our project again, and in order to use EJS, what do you think I'm going to need to do? Install it, right? So let's go npm I EJS. Cool. So if we go back to our package.json, notice how it's managing that stuff for me. I don't need to do anything with my dependencies. Drops them in there once I install them. I can also uninstall them very easily. npm, whoops, where the heck am I? If I go npm uninstall EJS, so that what that's going to do is it's going to take care of cleaning up all the sub-dependencies for me as well. So you don't want to go, excuse me, you don't want to go directly inside that node modules folder and just think, oh, I can delete this folder or whatever. Well, that's not going to delete the sub-dependencies of the thing we took out, right? Okay, so let me install that one more time. EJS. Okay. Now, before we get into the templating with EJS, let's talk about a little bit about why we might even want to use Express to begin with. Does anyone have any idea why we're even doing this? Yes.
Because of all the variable routes that you have to put on Node,
Get faster.
it reduces all that work.
Yeah, so yesterday when we were creating our server, we had to create a lot of excuse me, a lot of if conditions, right? So if the route was this, or we might also check the method. We might also say if the route was this and the method was this, then let's handle it this way, right? Yeah, and then what about static files? That's a really good point. So what happens if we're trying to load up some different style sheets and so forth? Don't we kind of have to do the same thing? We have to ask, is it this specific style sheet route, right? And then if it is, let's hand back that file, that sort of thing. What a pain in the butt. So Express comes along to the rescue to make our job a lot easier, and we can create these very simple routes. All right, nice. So how are we going to actually use EJS now that we've installed it here? So you might think, hey, I need to require it up here, right? I mean, that would be sort of the natural inclination. But actually what we're going to do is we're going to just make a couple changes here to our server.js code. And we're going to set some properties on the app that we've created. So we're going to say app.set, and then we'll say our view engine that we want to use is called EJS. Okay? And then the other thing that we want to set is where are our views going to be housed. Okay? We don't have a folder for that yet, but we can create one. So let's say app.set views, and then we need to tell it where we want those views to be. So before I do that, let's just create a folder for our views. We'll just call it views. It's exciting. And so I want to direct it to this particular folder. So would I just say views is views? Does that seem like the best way? Yeah, we're going to need some kind of pathing here, right? And for this, I'm going to use a special object or a special property that we haven't seen yet. And we'll console log it out. Double under dir name. Okay? So let's save that and let's look at what we got in our terminal. Okay, so notice here I've got this complete direct path to where we are right now. And if this was being run on, say, Brian's computer, that path would be quite different, right? Depending on where he was storing this project. So we can use the dir name to route it to this correct folder, no matter who's running the project. All right? So rather than just saying views inside there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say I want it to be the current directory that I'm in plus that right there. So /views. Okay, and I'll just get rid of that right there. So what we want to do is that when we hit this route, rather than just rendering a string, we actually want to render a template, right? Let's create a template in here. So I'll just create index.ejs. Okay, and just so you guys know, there's also there's an extension in VS Code that you can use for EJS. I think it's just called EJS if I remember correctly. Does anyone know? Is it EJS? Oh, here it is. So there are a couple different ones. There's this EJS language support, and then there's EJS snippets. So this is the one that I have installed, EJS language support. So that way when you actually do your EJS tags in there, they will be recognized. All right, cool. So let's just save this guy, and then we'll say hello from EJS. Okay, and then how are we going to send that? So rather than response.send, does anyone know what we're going to use here? Render, there we go. You know what's up. Response.render. Okay, and I should just be able to say, do I even need the extension? Sometimes I forget about these things. EJS. All right, yeah, let's try without, right? So let's do response.render. And by the way, you guys will typically see these guys shortened to rec and res when you're working with Express, so we can make that change as well. So I can call this rec. And in fact, since we're not going to use it all, I may just put an underscore in front of it. You notice how the color was slightly light when you don't do that? It's just saying you haven't used this variable in your code at all. So if I underscore it there, it won't do that. Okay, and then our response.render, let's try this out. So if I go back to my terminal here, okay, so I don't even need the file extension on that. That's kind of nice. Cool. Right on. Let's work on actually outputting something to the template. So this is nice. We don't have anything dynamic going on right now. Let's pass in some information to this. So how do you think we're going to do that? How do we do it in Python? In Django. Yeah, we have this context dictionary, right? So we'll have the same thing here. We're just going to create an object that has some different key value pairs, and then inside the template, we'll be able to reference those using the key groups. Okay, so let's say I wanted to have this object that has some users in it, and we'll create some users. I'll make Jessica my user, my first user. Yep.
The required keyword, is that the same as import?
No. No, they're not quite the same. Yeah. But usually you'll see require used in a node context. It is, I can't remember what version they started supporting imports. Quite recently, though. It's been experimental for a long time. Okay. Email would be j@y.com. Okay, cool. So inside my template, let's say I wanted to actually iterate through some users. How would I do that?Thead, tr, th. Okay. I'm forgetting how to do this. God dang. TD times 3. Alright, first, last email. First, last email. Okay, so for each row, what I want to do is I want to use that control structure, like we were doing in Python. So instead of the curly brace, we've got this, and we could say something like for, I don't know, const user of users. That should work, right? Anyone? Does anyone know if this is going to work? Who knows? Let's do it, right? Alright. Should work. Alright, so let's just bring this guy in here. And then in here, how am I going to output these guys? Like the actual bits of information. Now I want the first name, the last name, and the email, right? How am I going to output those? So we have to use this little bracket, equals, exactly. And then we'll say user dot first name, right? Okay. And in fact, let me just duplicate this real quick. And then we got last name, email. All right. Let's try that real quick. Hey, it worked. What do you know? Yeah, that's pretty sweet. So now we're actually passing some dynamic information to the viewer, right? Okay. What if I wanted to add something else to my view, some piece of dynamic information? How would I do it? I'd make another key value pair inside that context object. All right. So if I just wanted to have, let's say my page title was dynamic in some way, I could just pass that in there, and then inside my index.ejs, let's say I want to output that up in here. Now I can do, whoops, I need that equal sign, right? Title. Okay. Save that, go back to there, and we'll see if I hover over here, it's giving me some title, right? Okay, cool. Any questions about this part, just the dynamic rendering using EJS? Does that pretty much make sense to you guys? Looks familiar, right? Yes. Yeah.
For the engine template.
Template engine.
Yeah. Is it that notation, or can we use the if we're like looping, using a for loop, we use the brackets, or you know how in Django.
Are you asking about this dot notation we're using right there?
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah, we
okay.
use like the parentheses and the brackets, because in Django you weren't allowed to use it because of the
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, could we use bracket notation?
yeah.
Yeah, we should be able to. That should be no problem. If I go like this. Still the same thing.
Close.
Yeah, so that works. Yeah, so again, we do have these two different ways of accessing attributes on objects, and depending on the situation, you may have to use bracket notation sometimes, right? Okay, cool. So if everyone feels pretty good about that, let's just talk about how to deal with static content. So what types of things are static in our web pages? Style sheet, good. Images, that's a good one. Cool. And then I heard HTML. HTML can sometimes be static as well, right? So if we just had some HTML page we wanted to send back for a certain situation, we could do that. So let's just create a static folder. And then we'll have some different subfolders in there. So maybe we'll have an HTML folder. We'll also have a style sheets folder. Actually, let's call it CSS. That's better. And then I'll also just create a JS folder. We probably won't use it for now, but maybe an images folder. That's a good one. Okay, cool. So if I want to actually include some of these things on my page, what I'm going to need to do is make some change inside our server code. Okay, and I'm going to use something called express.static. Express.static will allow us to route, basically check and see, does this file exist inside a specific directory that I specify? And if it does, let's just give it back to the client without doing any more of the routing work. Okay. So after we've created our app, let's do this. Let's say app.use. And what this means is that for every request that comes through my application, I'm going to use the logic inside here. Okay. The logic, again, is just going to check to see, do I have this file already? And if I do, let's just give it right back. Let's not do any other work that we have following this. So what I'm going to do is express.static. And then inside here, you can see we have to say what the root is. So what folder am I going to look for static assets? All right. So where am I going to specify that? I may want to use this guy again, right? Dir name. So let's say we're going to look at dir name plus we also want static following that, right? Okay, cool. So now let's say I create a style sheet inside here. Let's just go styles.css. It's always good to do something nice and obvious, right? Background black. Goldenrod, all right. Best color ever. All right. And then inside my template, I want to link that, right? So let's go link. And then the href is just going to be, so it's going to be looking inside of our static folder already, right? So I want to go /CSS and then /styles.css. All right, and let's see if we can successfully do that. We've got that okay. It's working, right? Yeah, it's a pretty nice color, right? Do we want to put any images on this page? What kind of images do you guys want to look for? Cats and cars. All right, any good ones in here? Whoa, look at this. Is that Taylor Swift?
Do the meme with the cat and the girl.
Grumpy cat?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, Grumpy Cat. Grumpy Cat's great too.
Grumpy cat. Memes. Oh wow, that's.
You know that cat was worth like $10 million.
She passed away.
No, and then he died.
Yeah.
So,
Cars and cats. Let me go to where we are. So we are in.
Yeah, it's in the Christmas special. There's a Christmas special with Grumpy Cat.
I think he was on Ellen.
It's actually not bad.
Grumpy cat.jpg. Alright, so let's put old Grumpy Cat in there. So I've got Grumpy Cat inside my images folder, so that's cool. So let's just do down here img, and then our src is going to be /images, and then /grumpy-cat.jpg. Let's go back to our page. Woo!
Alright.
That's one
Oh my
grumpy.
God.
That's one grumpy looking
How
cat.
did it get famous?
It like
Yeah,
just
what's the
went
story
viral.
there?
The crown.
Is it like a vine?
They
or
should
just
just make
a
the face
picture?
and
It's just a picture.
It's like
This is pre-vine.
Oh,
Is
right.
this is pre-vine?
Pre-vine.
It has dwarfism. That's why it has that face.
That's what?
Does it really?
Yeah.
Dwarfism?
I know too much about this guy.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. All right, so let's make sure we understand what this was doing. So this was kind of the key piece of code here. On line 8, let's talk about this. Ivan, tell me what's happening on line 8.
Line 8.
Yeah.
At ooze.
Did you say ooze?
Ooze.
Ooze. What's it oozing?
We're basically going direct through and static folder. That's what we're using.
Let's try to get a little more technical here.
Sorry.
All right, so what app.use means is that for every request that comes into our application, we're going to run this logic inside, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So express.static is saying we're going to pick a specific folder and look for an asset inside that folder. If it exists, then we'll just give it right back to the browser and be done with our whole request response cycle. If it doesn't exist, what's going to happen is that we go down to the next route handler. Okay? So if that doesn't exist either, then what do you think is going to happen? We're going to get some kind of a 404. Yeah, exactly. And we don't really have a catch-all handler right now. So if I try to go some bunk URL that doesn't exist, just going to say something like this, cannot get bunked. Right?
She said funky.
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 Oh, yeah. Right. Funky. Good point. We had some fun with that funkiness, right? All right. Excellent. So that's really all we need to do to create some basic routes, be able to link up some static assets, and then also display some dynamic information in the template. Right?
Seems a lot easier to set up than user.
It really is, right? I mean, you install your dependencies, you write this code, and you're good to go. Yeah. Yeah, quite simple. And that's why I was saying before, this is a little bit more reminiscent of Flask, right? Kind of a minimal setup we had to do. So, pretty nice. Cool. Let's have thumbs all around on this. Keanu?
Right here.
Oh, okay. It's up but down.
Just perfect shoulder. Nice.
Oh, okay. Okay, fair enough. Cool.
Not me.
Yeah, not me. So again, today's end of day goal, what was that?
It's cars and
Cars and cats and Node. Okay. So that, of course, will be tying into what we did yesterday when we created a server using the HTTP module. Okay. And what'll be cool about that is that after you complete that assignment, you're going to be wishing you did it in Express. This would have been way easier if I did it in Express. Yeah. All right, cool. So you guys are dismissed.